Welcome back. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. Now, after being snubbed by the key European and NATO allies, the US President Donald Trump has escalated his rhetoric, warning that Washington could, quote-unquote, finish Iran even as international backing continues to shrink. Iran has, however, shown no signs of backing down and is tightening its hold over the Strait of Hormuz, pushing the crisis into dangerous territory. Amidst all this, the NATO and European powers are refusing to step in, leaving the US increasingly isolated. Washington now faces a difficult choice. Either it can choose to escalate further and risk a wider regional war, or seek a diplomatic off-ramp before the situation spirals beyond control. Let's open up this conversation. Ambassador Basuti Mukherjee on the telecast with me. Ambassador Mukherjee, let's hear it from you with regards to this snub that has been faced by US President Donald Trump, despite attempts that he has made, whether it is about threats, lambasting the NATO and the European allies. They continue steadfast in their resolve to not intervene, not interfere in the conflict that is clearly the product of Donald Trump exerting his power unrelentingly against Iran.
But absolutely, Megha, good to be on your show. The NATO allies or Western allies, whatever we choose to call them, have made it very clear to President Trump that this is not their war. It's a war that he has created. And in fact, it is devastating that the chief of the counterterrorism resigned, saying that there was no threat to the United States from Iran, and he has resigned in protest. As far as the NATO allies of the West are concerned, they would be very hesitant to send in their warships to the Straits of Hormuz, making a bad situation worse, because many of them are bilaterally in talks with the Iranians to see how they could get out of this difficult situation or get some of their tankers through on a friendly basis or with some naval support from their navies, if that is permitted, etc. In fact, Megha, quite frankly, we've done the same with a couple of our own tankers. We've been in bilateral talks, and with the Indian Navy's very important assistance, we've been able to get 2 tankers and a third one out. So this is very clearly an indication that Donald Trump is stuck in a war that he has created. But Donald Trump, being Donald Trump, instead of understanding what this message means, he has berated the West. He has said that Macron is not going to get re-elected, forgetting that Macron is already almost at the end of his second term, etc., etc. He has been very rude, in my perspective, to the UK Prime Minister, etc. The point here is that what Donald Trump desperately needs is a mediator. And here, if he reaches out to Putin, maybe Putin could bail him out in return for Trump bailing him out of Ukraine. Already we have heard disturbing news of the Chinese encircling Taiwan, etc. This is not good for international peace and security. Indian Ocean, we've had a Iranian ship torpedoed in the Indian Ocean just off the territorial waters of Sri Lanka. And now we are hearing disturbing news that Trump also wants to go after Cuba. So I think before the dust settles, it's time for mediation. And I really hope and pray, Megha, that there could be some kind of mediation, perhaps through President Putin, to bring this difficult situation to an end, which is impacting the entire global economy. Megha.
Okay, I'm also being joined by Mike Picus. He's a competitive intelligence and OSINT analyst. He's joining me from Washington. Thank you very much. And let's take a look at a number of these posts, flurry of posts that the US president has put out on his Truth Social account. He says the latest one has come out 2 hours ago. it says US allies need to get a grip, step up and help open the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, there have been threats that have been issued by Donald Trump against its NATO allies, also showing regret and unhappiness, going about saying that every time NATO needs United States help, it comes out and supports NATO, but it's not true the other way around. On practical terms as well, why do you think it is integral for Europe to maintain cordial relations with Iran?
Well, I think there's a number of things going on here. I think the first is that Iran is just a very important strategic player in the Middle East, but it is largely at odds with a lot of the countries it is surrounded by, both immediately and in the region, and having attacked numbers of Gulf states that were sort of neutral, or in the example of Qatar, supporting some of the terrorist activity coming out of Iran in the general area. Iran hasn't been very good at making friends, which is why as the ambassador quite rightly said, there is a path to getting out of this. It's almost certainly going to probably involve the Russians, because there is still a sort of a backdoor channel there. To your point about whether or not Europe needs to maintain cordial relations with Iran, I think the million-dollar question is which version of Iran do they need to maintain cordial relations with? They don't have a ton of incentive to want to be in this war, but the Strait of Hormuz is a huge choke point for energy, and it's driving up energy prices all over the world. Who benefits from that? Well, not the Europeans. The Russians benefit because it sends the Brent crude over $100 a barrel. And that allows them, when they've been spending in a deficit, to actually start to kind of claw some of that money back. So Europe is in a bit of a pickle, and certainly strains with the United States over this are not going to make it any better. But I would say that their incentive is limited here, and perhaps the only sort of extension of this would be that Islamic terror cells stemming from Iran, and whether or not they're operating in Europe, that in terms of actual threats to European homeland security. But beyond that, Europe specifically is really only going to be drawn further into this as it relates to bilateral security and energy prices.
I'm also going to get into the conversation, Dr. Sharad Kohli. And Dr. Kohli, what do you make of a president who goes about saying that we are going to finish off whatever is left of the Iranian quote-unquote terror state? He goes on to suggest that we should let countries that are using the Strait of Hormuz be responsible for the navigation, for the transit that happens along the strait. How feasible and how practically possible is it going to be?
Good evening, Megha, to you, my fellow panelists and the viewers. I was scrolling today on the YouTube, and I was looking for an old song. I'm fond of music, and I was searching on the YouTube, and suddenly something popped up. Allow me to say a line, and I'll definitely like to translate it for our foreigner friend. Dekhi zamane ki yari, bichhde sabhi bari bari. This is an old Guru Dutt song. I'm sure our panelists, they're nodding their head and smiling away. Well, basically for our foreign panelists, I would say that I have seen the friendship of my old friends, and they all left me one by one. That's what it literally means when you translate it. But the fact of the matter is that NATO said that we didn't tell you to start this war. And President Trump has been trying to alienate himself because of his foreign policies, ever since the tariffs. Look at what the comments that he passed on EU and NATO countries when the tariffs were being levied. Now, what is going to be the impact of this when the NATO countries have not sort of decided to support, which was being called for so loudly over his Truth Social and other channels? Now, the moment he starts forgetting the war, although it's not going to happen anytime soon, the story of tariff, the game of tariff, is again going to be there. And this time, NATO countries should be prepared for 200, 300% tariffs being announced as threats, because saying that you didn't help me when I needed you to. Now,
yeah, but
this is, I
unfortunately,
feel,
he cannot even use that tactic any longer because his tariff game has obviously been struck down heavily by the Supreme Court of United States of America.
No, Megha, then you're underestimating, Donald Trump. You're underestimating him for the simple reason that there are plenty of sections, Section 301, Section 232, and he's already announced the list of 60 countries. It won't take him long, although there are only 200 countries around the world. It won't take him long to say that all 600 countries, probably countries for Venus and Mars, will also be subject to this investigation. So therefore, don't underestimate him. I think it is too early to conclude on President Trump. NATO countries should be ready for some very tough economic sanctions being levied. This fire of intikam, revenge, will burn under him. When you needed help, I invested billions and billions of dollars in your countries. Wherever you needed, I was there for you. Today, when I needed you, you simply turned your back. You showed your back to me. So I think this is going to lead to a complete economic chaos. You wait and see. Right now, the fire of war is burning. Soon as this fire subsides, he's not going to forget this particular incident. And you know how EU and NATO is reacting? Because the energy prices have already started climbing in Italy, France, Germany. The gas prices, the fuel prices, they've started, even though there is no Strait of Hormuz, as far as probably France or Germany is concerned. Maybe there is no direct relation to Strait of Hormuz, but then even America by itself is being impacted. The price per gallon in America has gone up. You know, he's facing the wrath of this economic chaos. So I think President Trump, although Megha, I would like to say here that let's not conclude about President Trump for even tonight, because tomorrow morning it could be something else. Tomorrow afternoon there'll be another President Trump, and tomorrow evening there's going to be another President Trump. So let's not. There is no long-term prediction. I have made it a theory. And Megha, I would invite you to my office someday. We're not too far from your studios. You will see a big screen in my office which tracks a new index which is called Trump Mood Index. We relate this index to the stock markets. We relate this to the commodity markets. We relate this index to the bilateral trade happening around the world. And you literally see this is being plotted. You will forget an ECG printout when you see this particular index, Megha.
Okay, all right. Also, what is the probability that Europe starts to buy oil from Russia, which it had heavily sanctioned in the recent circumstances in the war between Ukraine and Russia? But let me also get in general Anuj Mathur into the conversation. And why do you think, the all guns blazing Donald Trump that struck Iran without any consultations from NATO or even the Congress that was sitting in the United States of America suddenly needs desperate help from NATO allies?
Megha, Jai Hind, thank you very much. And I would make a statement before I answer your question. And the statement is, this issue is because of the arrogance, please pardon me using this word, arrogance of the president of the most powerful, so to say, and most economically strong country of the world. I will give you a few examples. The NATO, American allies, and all American friends were there with them when they did Iraq. They were there with them when they did Afghanistan. They were there with them when they did Libya. Anything and everything that America has done. America, mark my word, Megha, America, and the people were there with them. Now they are not with Trump. It is not Megha, America. They are not with Trump. Now, a few things. Donald Trump, one, he has already covered Sharad, tariff warfare, whichever way it was. He has gone on to make a statement that then Danes have done nothing in Afghanistan. Are you aware that the maximum number of lives to the population, to the number inducted, have been lost by the Danes in the Afghanistan war? He has gone on to say that the British troops were only behind and they did only subsidiary kind of jobs and they did not fight. You can't keep doing things like this, keep insulting everyone else, keep saying, even now, Megha, Donald Trump has not requested for assistance. He has gone on to say, look, fellas, either you give me assistance, or you come send your navies here, or I will do what Sharad is saying. So this is not the way.
No,
This
no,
is not.
he's been
Just
completely, he's been making embarrassing statements, humiliating Keir Starmer, sitting over there with the German Chancellor Merz, and he goes about saying Keir Starmer is no Churchill. I mean, so that's, some really caustic comments coming in, and Keir Starmer does nothing. I mean, he's just sitting down.
Same thing for the Spanish leadership. He said the Spaniards are good, the Spanish leadership is bad. So the point is not that. Point one, that is one way. Second thing, I'll talk from a military point of view. See, when the most powerful navy of the world, so to say, has just surrendered to the opening of Strait of Hormuz. I mean, they've literally surrendered. That's the only word that comes to my mind. See, the point is, one thing is very, very clear. The custodians, the guardians of Strait of Hormuz are the Iranians, without a doubt. Now, if you want Strait of Hormuz to be cleared, you need massive operations, and those massive operations will involve not only the naval maritime operations, but also capturing all those islands from Kurd Island to the northern easternmost island, and also the shores which are directly dominating the Strait of Hormuz. Unless you physically do that, tell me how will you do it? Sea denial is the prerogative of the Iranians. They will make sure it takes no time for them to fire half a dozen drones if you try to enter.
No, absolutely. What does Iran have to lose? I mean, they are retaliating. The supreme leader has been killed. The son is obviously looking for retribution. Okay, I'm going to come back to you, sir, Ambassador Mukherjee. Speaking about another point, Trump goes on and justifies this war against Iran to hit the terror state. These proxies that have been operating by way of Hezbollah and Houthis and Hamas, but at the same time, he has a very contradictory approach to Pakistan, which continues to send its proxies to India and other parts of the world. We have seen number of terror attacks. So where does Trump's logic sit when it comes to Pakistan?
Well, Trump clearly believes in good terrorists and bad terrorists. This is not the first time that the Americans have had this definition. We are used to it, Megha. So the good terrorists are those who are in Pakistan, who are presently bashing Afghanistan during the holy month of Ramadan, and many people feel the American deep state is behind it. And the bad terrorists are the Iranians who were willing to make a deal with him. In fact, the deal was apparently complete and waiting for signature, but because of pressure, many feel, also from the very powerful Jewish lobby, he decided to go in through the imperial arrogance that we are used to since we've been colonized for 180 years. This is imperial post-colonial arrogance, that how can anybody stand up to me? Perhaps in the United States, they should reintroduce the study of history, world history, in their school syllabus, because clearly in the expensive school that Trump went to, he didn't realize that there are two countries that have brought down empires. One is Afghanistan and one is Persia. Neither has ever been colonized. Not even when the British colonial empire was at its height, they were not able to colonize either Persia or Afghanistan. Right now, what Trump needs, like all bullies, Megha, he needs a face saver. I used to always think that it's we Asians who like face savers. No. Trump needs a big face saver because he's got a big fat face to save. And who can save it better than the Russians, who are so delighted? The Russian crude, Megha, as Sharad would tell you, it is at astronomical prices. The Russians are delighted.
Yeah.
The Russians are minting money. They should send him a thank you card. Because of him, he has actually ensured that the Russians have got all their money back from the Ukraine war. He is actually very good in helping those who do not like the United States. He has helped the Chinese, he has helped the Russians, and he has destroyed all his allies. I
Okay.
think now it's a safe favor and a mediator.
Megha, it's also interesting, while there has been no support coming from the Western allies, the Gulf Islamic nations are not doing much in terms of an offensive and joining hands with the US administration. Although Donald Trump really isn't pursuing these nations to support the American war against Iran, because there are a lot of conflicting aspects, because there are contradictions. The fact that if these Islamic nations were to strike Iran and support this war against Iran, they would invariably end up supporting Israel. And that has been a very difficult relationship that Israel, with the help of America, has been trying to normalize with Saudi Arabia, UAE and other nations. They have been at this point of time playing on the defensive. They have been intercepting these drones and missiles, but there has been no offensive. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I think it's first important to remember that most of the Gulf states aren't particularly well armed in an offensive capability or capacity. Like, they're not used to warfare in the same way that Israel or other nations in the region, or even Jordan or Egypt for that matter, are used to that. Jordan has participated in a number of they've sent fighter pilots and other things into the skies to knock out Iranian missiles, but it was a real step, a real development when Iranian Shahed drones and missiles began hitting targets in Bahrain, in Qatar especially. That was super surprising, just because it's like you sort of thought the last place that they'd hit would be Qatar, UAE as well. But I think I want to remind the audience that, and I'm speaking here as an American, which is that we have a long memory, and the terror state in Iran, and let's just call it what it is because that's what it is. They have spread terrorism to all parts of the globe, and people have died as a result of that. And there was a lot of blood on their hands when it comes to American and allied troops. I point to the barracks bombings in Lebanon, and the backing of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and other parts of that axis. So I think the important thing to remember here is, like I said, the Gulf states aren't particularly armed in an offensive capability. I mean, they have militaries, but
do you find it, I find it difficult to digest. How difficult is it for Qatar to lob a missile into Iran if it so desires?
I'm not. I think the general might be better equipped to answer that question on the exact amount of like offensive capabilities that Qatar has had. My impression is that Qatar has always preferred to fund other nefarious groups around the world, rather than actually developing its own capabilities. They've never been particularly interested in that. I think they've always felt like their money will protect them from whomever wants to come after them. But I think the important thing here to remember is that there is a shared strategic interest between the West, the United States, and Israel to remove the regime in Tehran, because it is responsible for a lot of the instability in the region that we've seen over the past, since 1979, since the Islamic Revolution. So to the ambassador's point of what are the incentives of people getting involved? Well, one incentive would be, and one of the reasons why Trump wanted to go in the first place, and why he moved a historic amount of, to the general's point, sea power into the region, is clearly there was going to be some kind of operation. It was just a question of when. The last thing I'll say is the remaining question is how long is this going to drag on? And that is a question that will have international implications, but also domestic implications, because there's arguments about whether he should have been allowed to start this. That's a very, very controversial subject. But the important thing to remember here is that the world will be a safer place if the elements that run Iran right now and the IRGC are A, not slaughtering thousands of their citizens in the street. That would be a huge step in the right direction. And B, not exporting terror all over the world.
Okay. Sharad, there's a popular sentiment in United States of America and in international media as well that Trump is trying to pull the attention away from the Epstein files and his alleged involvement to fight, to wage this war, which is $16.5 billion in 15 days that this war has been waged by America, and a number of Americans, troops that have lost their lives as well. Again, the question, how long can Trump sustain it, and will he be able to escape the hearing in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, and in the courts of law in his alleged involvement in the Epstein files?
Well, I don't think he's worried about courts. If you see his comments on the courts in America, for example, the trade court has already ordered $166 billion of refund of the tariffs collected. I think the contempt of court in the American courts will have to be activated, because he's not going to listen to courts. He's very quick in passing remarks on the courts, for that matter. As far as diverting the attention is concerned, yes, diverting attention to a lot of things, not just Epstein files, diverting attention from the inflation with the American economy. I was coincidentally with an American delegation today, and there were a lot of people amongst the delegation who were telling me the cost of living is shooting up every other day. Jobless claims are rising. Investments are not coming in unless they are coming in with gun on the head. They don't seem to be coming in naturally as far as America is concerned. $39 trillion of debt piling every day against $30 trillion of total GDP, which means 130% debt to GDP ratio is really, really worrying for America. He's trying to bring in factories to America, and no factory can be set up with the kind of cost of production which comes in America. So I think there is a diversion of attention from a lot of things. A quick answer to your question about Pakistan. How did we forget about World Liberty Finance? The crypto company set up by his folks out there. And so that's what makes good terrorists. What, Ambassador Mukherjee said, good terrorists. In fact, the definition of good terrorist now, you should have a crypto company from the folks in your country to be called as good terrorists. Well, all in all, I think he's trapped in his own move. He thought this was a 3-4 day operation. With Khamenei gone, his inspiration was at its top. The very second day, he killed the supreme leader. But then it so happened, and as they say, the rest is history. I don't think this is going to end anytime soon. Iran said, you started the war. We're going to finish it. And I think Donald Trump doesn't know where's the bottom of this war. And I think he's trapped. He can't proceed. He seems exhausted, tired, and he can't go back now. I think this is a catch-22 situation. And having alienated all his friends because of this move, I'm sure when he sleeps at night, Truth Social is only thing with him, and that's it.
All right, fair enough. Thank you all for joining me on the telecast, sharing your views. We'll keep a close eye on all these big developments coming in from West Asia. And of course, the million-dollar question, when is this war going to end? Thanks for watching NewsX.